I'm going to visit a great band of red rock that winds its way across the landscape. I'm taken by the beauty that surrounds me as I travel my path. I also reflect on the great forces that uplifted and tilted these rocks so very long ago. Today, we'll uncover an incredible, almost unbelievable story held within the rocks that redefines the way we view dinosaurs.
Hello, I'm Myron Cook. I'm sure grateful to be out here on this beautiful day, enjoying the scenery and of course the geology. I'm just at the Wyoming-Montana border near the Pryor Mountains, and what a beautiful country, isn't it? But I've got a special treat here for you, I believe, because we're combining geology with dinosaurs. Now, does it get any better than that? And we're going to make a series of observations that lead us down a wonderful path of Earth's history. And of course, with these observations, we often make breakthroughs in our understanding. And in this case, it'll be both with geology and dinosaurs. And to understand the significance of the dinosaur information that I'll be presenting, we have to have a good background understanding of the geology. So let's get started.
We'll be focusing on this amazing ribbon of red rock and the overlying cap of light-colored layers that flanks many of the mountains in the region. Away from the mountains, out in the basins, this sequence of rock is buried several thousand feet, but about 65 million years ago, the mountains formed, uplifting the rock from the depths where it was eroded and exposed for us to enjoy. This giant bend in the rock is due to a great fold that formed the Pryor Mountains of Montana and Wyoming. Let's start by examining this bright red rock. It's referred to as the Chugwater Formation or group. It actually has 3 formations within it in this region, but we won't get into that. This stratigraphic column shows all the rock layers in the region. The Chugwater shown here is Triassic in age. It was deposited from about 250 to 200 million years ago and is about 800 feet thick.
The Chugwater. Boy, isn't it a red color? And I hope some of you remember in prior videos when I mentioned that if you see red sedimentary rock like we see here with a lot of siltstone and some mudstone shales and some sandstone, and it's all red, that means it was deposited in the presence of oxygen. We say they were deposited in a continental setting. And that's because there was oxygen available to rust the iron and create this rusty color. Now to this unit, one thing I really like, I like to think and imagine in my mind the path that this siltstone, oh boy, that's soft. Siltstone, lots of siltstone here. The path that these grains took to get here. Where did all these deposits come from? And it turns out that most of it came from the Appalachian Mountains. That's a lot to think about, isn't it? So we know it was an arid environment as well, which means it's likely quite hot, and there's evidence that says that. We have gypsum scattered about through here that informs us of that. So it was a desert. Just think of a flat desert kind of as far as the eye can see for this period of time. And when I just casually say period of time, it was locked into this kind of environment for some 50 million years. There were only a couple periods when it seemed to be a little wetter, where you had some more moisture come in, seasonal moisture for sure. But other than that, it was just a very hot, dry desert for this great period of time.
This Blakey map shows the extent of the Great Desert I speak of, and also the seaway that comes down along the very western edge of Wyoming. We also see the highlands of the Appalachian Mountains, which at the time were spectacular, huge mountains. And of course, they were shedding off material to the west, rivers transporting it out to the desert.
Now, I've walked across a good bit of this Chugwater Formation. I walked out across some vegetated part of it that's covered with grasses and sagebrush, working my way up. And as I estimate, we'll say 2/3 of the way up to the top of this 800 feet. And the reason I came here is because I'm going to say a wild guess, because I don't have tight constraints in this particular area, but I know pretty close. Let's say it's about 230 million years old. Now, not far from here, in this very formation to the south and near Lander, they have found dinosaur bones at 230 million years old in this general vicinity, stratigraphically, you know, time-wise. And that turns out to be the oldest dinosaur fossil in North America. It's actually equal to the one in Argentina. They found some in Argentina, and actually many paleontologists think that these bones here and in Argentina are the oldest dinosaur fossils available. There's some in Tanzania that some think's a little older, but we'll just say these are the oldest ones. And dinosaurs came along some 20 million years before that because they see trackways. I think the oldest trackway is in Poland, for instance.
It's amazing to think that the earliest dinosaurs were living out in this harsh desert along rivers and lakes, and they were just chicken-sized. It's neat to know that this rock contains the oldest dinosaur bones in the world, but that's not the paradigm shift that we're going to learn about. Higher up in this section, there's a change. Notice the difference in the texture. This is actually quite significant. In this closer view, we see the typical slope-forming silt of the Chugwater, but then above it, things change. The contact between the two units is a bit irregular. It's quite a distinctive texture, isn't it?
Okay, so this strange texture we see that's weathering in the outcrop, that's usually a red color over here that we see in the drone footage. Now we know it's this white material. It's just covered with red staining, iron staining, and it's gypsum. Gypsum! We have changed the world here. We've gone from the desert to ocean, because you have restricted ocean, very harsh environment, high evaporation rates, very hot most of the year, can be very, very dry most of the time, but at periods a higher humidity, like the modern day Persian Gulf, where you get this gypsum deposited just offshore in these relatively shallow, restricted waters.
So the great change at this contact is due to a rise in sea level. We're still in a harsh desert, but we're in the ocean.
But this contact is more than that. This is the contact between the Triassic and the Jurassic. And a massive extinction occurred right here. As I recall, like 85% of all life died between here at my feet and here in the Jurassic. There are a couple theories that are prominent. One is a great impact that occurred, and another one is massive volcanism that changed the whole environment of the Earth from all the volcanoes. It's pretty hard to know what it was, but we know 90% or so of life died right here. Oh, and by the way, this is when Pangea started to break up right here. So, boy, there's a lot going on. And this formation from here up is referred to as the Gypsum Spring Formation. And it's at about 170 million years older. So I think it starts at 171 and goes up to like 168 million years. So, and we're going to investigate this some more, because this all plays in to this breakthrough and appreciation of our dinosaurs.
So we have gypsum, then above it we have a slope-forming red siltstone, and then this light-colored unit that tops it. We need to take a look at that.
A bit steep here, a bit precarious to get to this first ledge here. Okay, so I have the gypsum below me. Then I have a sequence of red beds that look just like the Chugwater on top of that gypsum. And then I have this first ledge, and it is limestone. Now you get looking at it, and it's hard to see. I'll show you photos. But you see these thin beds, usually an inch or less or so, and they often are kind of wavy or kind of crinkly, I like to say. If you get looking, you'll see little holes in there. You wonder how they formed. Well, it turns out they were air bubbles. As algae was dying and rotting, it created gases, and the little air bubbles in the mud that formed this rock. So I gave you a clue there. Algae, yeah, these are algal or microbial mats, primarily composed of algae in this case, and then also cyanobacteria and other things. There's some other interesting things that I won't get into.
Not all of this limestone is algally bound. The upper part here is just a lime mudstone, and the top part where it's breaking up is the same, so it's not all algally bound.
But this is very indicative of Sabkhas. Extremely flat areas along a very harsh shoreline, like modern-day Persian Gulf.
The algal mats are growing along these darker colored areas that we see scattered about. They form in the intertidal zone.
Very hot most of the time, very arid, although you can get high humidity during certain periods, but the evaporation is very high. In fact, I see evidence in here of some little collapsing and stuff. Probably there were periods of little bits of gypsum in here, sometimes gypsum actually growing within the rock. I won't get into that right now, but this is all indicative of a very hostile environment.
In the summer, air temperatures can be easily 125 degrees Fahrenheit, and the water in the restricted areas can get up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. In some areas, polygonal desiccation cracks are common. These polygons are quite large. The dark color we see on these mud cracks is from cyanobacteria and algae. This distinctive bumpy texture formed by algal mats is referred to as pustular. As we can see, there are 2 to 3 more light-colored limestones separated by thin red siltstones that sit above the first bench that we examined. We also clearly see the contact between the Gypsum Spring Formation and the overlying buff-colored Sundance Formation, which was deposited in normal marine conditions.
So the Gypsum Spring, this beautiful formation, it's really quite iconic with these white colors that you see, as it's dominated by Sabkhas. And so what a world it was back then. And you're wondering, well, okay, let's get to the dinosaurs. How does this fit in? And I agree with you. But we're going to make one more really fun stop to look at this Gypsum Spring. And then we're going to put together some information about dinosaurs. And I think you'll be surprised. I sure was.
We've been focused in this area. Now let's move to the south, near to the community of Grable, Wyoming. For reasons that will become obvious shortly, I want to focus on the first bench and see what it looks like some 40 miles to the south.
On this steeper exposure here, where we can see these units involved, this is the upper part of this series of limestone beds. There's some more below me. The total thickness of it is maybe 20 feet thick, 15 feet thick. But as I look at it, for instance, this limestone here, it's pretty resistant. It's close to a foot thick maybe. A nice limestone, but you see algal laminations within it, this classic look that we see elsewhere. This slope here is just thinly bedded lime units, and again, it's algally bound. You can't see it here, it's under the debris, but you can see the thin layers within it, platy, break-off layers and things like that. And down here at my knees, the same. Very classic look of algally bound limestone.
So the first bench of limestone here is algally bound and was deposited in Sabkhas, just like what we saw to the north. It was in this amazing area nestled next to the Bighorn Mountains near the small town of Shell, Wyoming, that a very surprising discovery was made. It's also perhaps the best place to see the dramatic change from the harsh Sabkhas that deposited the red and white Gypsum Springs Formation to more normal marine conditions, resulting in the deposition of buff-colored deposits of the Sundance Formation. I'm following a thin ledge of limestone up this rather nondescript draw. It's within the first bench that we've been focusing on.
Walking up this draw here, I think I see a dinosaur track. I mean, this looks like a dinosaur track to me, but I'm not an expert. And if it is a dinosaur track, that kind of presents an issue, I think. What do you think?
When we see depictions of dinosaurs in their natural environment, it most often is in a heavily forested and vegetated landscape. This makes sense. These great beasts needed a lot to eat. Even the smaller ones, of course, needed to eat. In the early days, paleontologists and geologists almost universally envisioned dinosaurs wandering around in a tropical environment. Through time, scientists began to understand that at least some dinosaurs thrived in subtropical environments, temperate forests, and even deserts near rivers and oases. But could they have lived in the extreme environments of Sabkhas? It seems impossible to me.
I'm still thinking about this potential track. You know, if a geologist coming along that really knows his stuff, or a paleontologist comes along, and they see something like this in this unit we've been learning about, you know, the gypsum spring and the environment, what kind of conversation would they have? In other videos, I kind of have these imaginary conversations that geologists might have when they encounter something puzzling. And in this case, we're really lucky, because I actually have the geologist that discovered these trackways, Dr. Erik Quali. So come on over, Eric. Well, Eric, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Myron.
You know, Eric, he's a Wyoming geologist like me. He grew up near here. He's a very fortunate geologist like me. And unfortunately, we didn't know each other until here just not too long ago, but it's been great to get to know you a bit, Eric.
Absolutely.
And I want you to tell your story about what happened when you encountered this. You're telling me this is a track, is that right?
Well, yes, and that's the irony, is that, as you know, the story of the gypsum spring is one of extreme aridity.
Yeah.
And so when we think of dinosaurs,
Yeah.
oftentimes, I knew as a kid growing up, the dinosaurs lived in swamps with water up to their chest, maybe their head sticking
Yeah.
out of water.
Well,
And
they need a lot of food, don't they?
they need a huge amount of food, and the bigger the dinosaur, the more food
Yeah.
they need.
These are pretty good sized tracks. How tall do you think this guy was?
These guys would have been ranging in size from emu, maybe up to ostrich size. We found evidence of smaller ones, but the ones that we're seeing right here, they would be in that range.
Okay.
And so to think about an emu or an ostrich out on an extremely arid tidal flat,
Yeah.
what in the world are they eating? So that's why I think we were so surprised when we first started finding these tracks.
Did you have a hard time believing it initially, that the tracks? I mean, because of we're talking an extreme environment, as you already know, like modern day Saudi Arabia.
Yes, we were predisposed to recognize tracks because of a discovery we made the year before at
That's
Red
right.
Gulch. So we had, and we'd already been doing studies of that. But when we first got an inkling that there might be dinosaur tracks here, you know, you can't find some grotty little single print. It's got to be
A good one.
pretty, yeah, because
To really convince you.
yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe a series of them.
A series of them, yeah. A walkway, a trackway would be ideal, with enough definition that you're sure that you're dealing with a dinosaur. And these were some of the better ones that we saw outside of Red Gulch initially.
Now, Eric has mentioned Red Gulch. That's in a unit that's just a little bit younger, the Sundance, right? And Red Gulch, you can Google that, and that's a really cool track site that the BLM has set aside and whatnot. And Eric was the discoverer of that one as well. So this is really neat. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. Red Gulch
is cool.
About 3 million years younger, so we're
Okay.
at about 170 million years old based off our best dating. And yeah, when we saw these things, we thought, what in the world are these guys doing here? You know?
Ah, wow.
And if we'd only found one thing that looked, okay, maybe it looks like a three-toed print, you know, a bird-like print. Well, okay, you just mark it up as microkarsting or weathering or something, yeah. But when you start finding them over and over, and then you start
become
seeing,
convinced.
absolutely, and then you start seeing certain criteria like long middle toes, shorter outer toes, maybe the toes go to points, which would suggest claws. You start seeing right, left, and then you're going, hey, this is the way it is. These animals lived in an extremely arid environment.
Well, there are several tracks along here that you've found at different levels, but let's look around at a few tracks here along this particular limestone bench and let you tell us a bit about them. What do you say?
That sounds like a great idea. Myron, this is another example of one of these dinosaur tracks, and this one's important because it shows several of the features typically associated with dinosaur tracks. These are three-toed prints.
Right, classic.
Okay? Classic sort of three, yes. We don't have much of a heel. There is evidence of maybe some sort of what would be called a functional heel back here, but this isn't the full foot. So the actual heel is sitting up higher in a dinosaur's legs. This would be a two-legged dinosaur walking almost like a human does, really, with one foot right in front of the other. But among the other things, three toes, perhaps a remnants of a functional heel back here. This is important for two reasons. One is that you notice particularly this claw right here, and this is probably of the three toes, this would be the one on the inside, so there'd be another foot over here.
Okay.
So the center of gravity is going to sit to the left of this toe. So the pressure was put on that toe more than the other toes, and you can see that it's going right to a point, and
that's cool.
Implies a claw.
That's neat.
Very important on these, recognizing these dinosaur prints. So three toes, middle toe is longer than the outside toe. The inner toe has what appears to have a claw preserved. These are sort of tapering up here, not as obvious. The other important thing is that we know that when they were out walking on this tidal flat, probably lower intertidal, perhaps even covered by a few inches of water, that the mud was soft.
Yeah,
and we know that is because the weight was pressing down. You see this piling up or squeezing up of mud.
Oh, that's a higher area there where the mud was.
Exactly, yeah. So the mud was squeezing up around the toes, and we have a technical term called squeeze up.
That's a good geology term.
It is, yeah. It's very, it's very observational. So an important, another example of one of these really nice prints that we're seeing in this area.
Well, nice.
Here's another good track we can discuss a bit.
The visual analogs that we had were Red Gulch, and we had already started our detailed studies of the Red Gulch trackway. This is actually a cast of one of the better tracks. It's roughly the same size, probably a little bit larger print. This again shows the important characteristics. We have middle toe, we have an outer toe, an inner toe, and you can see that there's really not a heel on this animal.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And so that really tells us that these animals were toe walkers. They weren't walking with their full foot on the ground. And so that's really what we had as sort of an analog. You can see a little bit of a mud squeeze up right here, and here you see the same sort of mud squeeze ups right here where the animal's compressing down into the sediments. They're both carbonates. There are some differences which are important, but consistently the carbonate mud was very similar.
Eric has another place to show me that has a series of impressive trackways. Even better, the geology of the surfaces makes it abundantly clear what environment these dinosaurs were living within.
Now that you're somewhat accustomed to identifying dinosaur tracks, even those that are not so obvious, maybe you'll notice something here on this surface. Now I know it's difficult in video. I'll take a couple still shots to hopefully enhance that, but I'll give you a chance to look at it carefully. Well, I think it's time to bring in Eric. I think he can help us out with what he's seeing here. Now, there's a lot going on here, but there's one feature in particular I think he wants to point out.
Myron, one of the things that you had pointed out earlier in the day was these odd sort of amorphous features, these circular blobs that are in the stone.
Depressions.
Depressions, they look very much like depressions. So the question is, are these sort of modern weathering things, you're getting again some sort of mini karsting because we are talking about a carbonate mud here, or are they telling us something else that was going on?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things to do would be, if you see a blob like this, is that if that's a footprint, then there should be another one, because it's not just you know, one animal standing on one foot, but if it's part of a trackway, we should be able to demonstrate that.
Okay.
So let's just put a poker chip down here and mark that blob, and let's look out. Can we see another blob? Well, we see an odd sort of depression here. Okay, is that natural?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of getting more weathered in that direction, but let's try something here. You know, again, it's rough, but it's a depression. It doesn't look like it's completely bounded by fractures. Let's see. We've got. Oh, here's another one right here. So we've got another one.
Yeah, we're starting to develop a pattern, aren't we?
It appears to be.
Okay.
So we've got something right here. Now we've got another one up there. What's interesting about this is this almost looks like we've got toes.
So it could be a track, and it could be another direction too.
It could be in another direction, yeah.
Okay.
So we come up here, and again, this one's starting to look a little better because we've got sort of a point here, rounded back. So we'll call that one.
Yeah, that certainly builds your confidence, doesn't it?
It does, and when you start looking at the spacing on these things, then you start, okay, does it make sense with the spacing?
Why don't you walk that and see if it works?
Let's see how this works here. Let's make the assumption that this is the right foot. This would be left.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Left. Right.
And my stride is pretty much the same. I'm not varying it.
Yeah.
So
hey, you know what? I think I'm convinced.
It certainly is a compelling argument to support the idea that we're looking at a track surface here and a trackway.
But really impressive, isn't it?
We got here to this site when we first had reports there could be tracks up here and started thinking about it. We got here in the middle of the day in June, couldn't see a darn thing. We had a fortuitous circumstance where we went to a cabin down just at the mouth of the gully here, and they had a bunch of flagstones that had been laid out there for 100 years. And we started noticing really good dinosaur tracks on them. We said, where did you get those?
And they said, right here.
Right up this gully. We came back up, but we came at late in the afternoon. And when the oblique light hit it, it's like, it was a goosebump moment.
That's cool. That must have been fun.
That was a pretty heady day.
Well, that's great. So now I hope you're starting to see how geologists and paleontologists, once you see a lot of tracks and get familiar with them, you can see partial prints and whatnot and feel pretty confident, just like you would with a familiar track you might be familiar with. Like, let's say a horse print, a horse track. If you're really familiar with them, you can see just a small portion of it, or maybe it's kind of not well defined because it's in mud or whatnot, and you can feel confident because of your background, and that's kind of how this works.
Let's rewind the video and test your dinosaur track finding skills. There are actually quite a number of partial track prints in view. I've highlighted just 3 of them. On the trackway that we initially followed, apparently it was muddy because they are deep depressions, whereas these tracks are on firmer substrate, so conditions changed. This exposure a couple hundred yards away is very interesting for the geology and dinosaurs. Let's start with the geology and focus on just the basic patterns we see. Hopefully the texture here on this lower surface reminds you of a prior photo. It's a great example of pustular microbial mats. Now to the layer above, what pattern do you see here? Here's more of an overhead view. Hopefully you picked out the polygon shapes. I've highlighted just a few. This is the image I have in my mind. Now let's look at chicken-sized dinosaur tracks. We'll zoom in right here. This amazing track has a curved middle toe which is associated with meat eaters. There are hundreds of tracks, most of them partial ones, and it's not clear that they all have the curved middle toe. As I scanned this surface, seeing all the track marks, it reminded me of chicken tracks in the dirt where they have been feeding. Eric has been able to find tracks scattered about along the length of this great band of red in the first bench of the Gypsum Spring, and even to the south of this image, a total distance of some 80 miles.
Now it's time to talk about the big question. I do mean the big one, and that is apparently these dinosaurs, well, not apparently, I mean the evidence is pretty darn direct, that they were thriving on these Sabkhas. Incredibly harsh environment. And what were they eating? How were they doing this? And it turns out the answer has been in front of us all along. We've seen many examples of it. And maybe a few of you have actually thought about this a bit. I don't think I would have, but Eric did. Eric managed to think about it and came up with a really, I think, a wonderful idea as to how this was all occurring. Eric, why don't you tell us about that?
Okay, Myron, I want to reemphasize again that there are no skeletal remains anywhere in this formation.
So just we have tracks.
We have tracks, and that's what it's based on. So we can interpret these animals, you know, they're two-legged, walked in, you know, one leg in front of the other, lived in this very harsh environment, as you've said. The question is, what kind of dinosaurs? How did they survive? And when we first started this study, because of the many cases long middle toes, which we've seen, some of them going obviously into claws, many vertebrate paleontologists wanted to call them all meat eaters. It's like, well, if they're meat eaters, what are they eating? At some point, that's self-limiting. Now, were they the kind that could have gone offshore into waters to fish? And as you know, there's some issues there with temperature of the water and just how many fish.
I'm kind of skeptical on a Sabkha.
And I think you raised some very good points on that. It's like, well, okay, maybe there's a combination of plant eaters and meat eaters. Like, well, if there's plant eaters, the same problem. Where are the plants? What kind of...
Right.
And so I thought, well, what is it that we have a lot of? And what we have a lot of is evidence of algal mat growth. You can see it on these fine laminations here. Yeah, a nice little mounding here. It's almost like the organisms are growing up. We know it's a harsh environment because we don't find any evidence of gastropods like snails, which would be algae eaters. So these surfaces were not grazed by inverts. We have some inverts that lived here in vertical tubes, but these are probably more worm-like, and they could have been filtered.
You're talking in invertebrates.
Invertebrates, yeah. So it would come up. But the algae is the key. It's like if there was something for these animals to eat, it would have been algae. Well, what kind of animals today that would be two-legged eat algae? Well, my aha moment came when I saw a photograph of a flock of flamingos
flamingos.
Filter feeders, basically.
Filter feeders.
Yeah, and you've done a little bit of research on that, and you told me about how those animals actually
apparently
ate.
Flamingos, what they do is they get on these algal mats and they stomp around on them with their feet and stir it up, and all these fine particles of algae and cyanobacteria apparently get floating around in the water column, and then they filter it right out of the water column. Isn't that?
That's fascinating
amazing
to me. So if you had a combination of some sort of algal filter feeder and then maybe some meat eaters in there as well, but again, you know, that's sort of an educated guess on our part because we don't have this
know, and the audience, you've seen a lot of these algal mats and what I really like about this particular exposure is we have the trackway is right on this limestone right here. One of the trackways, okay? Right here with our algal matting adjacent to it. And, well, it's everywhere, this algal matting. I see it, we've seen it everywhere.
Everywhere.
So obviously it'd be a great source of food if they can adapt to it.
That's the most obvious source of food. We don't see any evidence of fossil soils that indicate plants, none of that. We have algae.
And so there it is. I think, to me, this is a big breakthrough. I mean, yes, you can kind of say dinosaurs likely adapted to all kinds of environments. That makes perfect sense, just like we see in modern birds and mammals. But to have evidence of it to this extreme level is just really an eye-opener for me. And I hope it's an eye-opener for you out there.
So maybe we had dinosaurs that had some characteristics of flamingos thriving in these harsh conditions. It's surprising that they ever went extinct.
Well, Eric, I've had a great time here with you out in the field, and I really appreciate your efforts and a lot of things that we're going to come to here in a second. But man, we've learned a lot about dinosaurs, and I want to thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And Eric's up to something else that I think is really important, and I am fully behind him, and the t-shirt kind of leads into that. Eric, why don't you tell us about this t-shirt you've got on?
Well, this is a t-shirt. It's came off a letterman's jacket in the 1940s for Grable Middle School, Grable Junior High School.
Wow.
We are in Shell, Wyoming right now, and Shell is sort of the focal point for some incredible dinosaurs that have been found. For almost 100 years now, dinosaurs have been collected from this part of the Bighorn Basin and collected by universities and academics from all over the world. Just north of us, the Howe Dinosaur Quarry is probably the most famous, and that was discovered in 1932 by Barnum Brown from the American Museum of Natural History. Barnum Brown was out here collecting literally from 32 to 34. In 34, they pulled thousands of dinosaur bones out of there. The dig was sponsored by Sinclair Oil. Sinclair has the dinosaur logo, and it was the sponsorship of Barnum Brown, the American Museum. That's how they got their logo. Thousands of bones were collected, shipped off to New York to the American Museum of Natural History. Not one of them stayed behind.
Ah.
But since that time, in the early 1990s, Kirby Sieber, a Swiss paleontologist, came over from a museum near Zurich, collected some very famous dinosaurs, Big Al 2, incredible sauropods. There was a baby sauropod that collected another quarry near here, all Morrison, all taken out of the country. If you want to see our dinosaurs from this area, you have to go to London, you have to go to Zurich, you have to go to New York, you have to go to Smithsonian. The closest one we have for our best and most iconic dinosaurs, you have to go to Bozeman.
Well, you know, speaking to the audience here, you know, this really impacts me at a kind of a deeper level. You know how I talk about geology, and these dinosaurs, they're gone. We need to bring a few back, don't we?
That's exactly what we're trying to do. And we're in front of the historic Shell Schoolhouse, established in the early 1900s. My mother, born in 28, went to school here. All of her sisters did. So I have a real link
Awesome.
to this school. What we're trying to do is I'm part of a board where we are raising funds to purchase casts of our most famous dinosaurs, bring them back and populate a museum. Our most famous dinosaurs, we want to bring those back and tell that story. Thousands of bones, hundreds of dinosaurs taken out. We're trying to bring facsimiles back and then create a Jurassic world around them. So what we want to do is create the environment, the sounds, the vegetation, everything. So when you walk into our museum, you'll feel like you're stepping back into the Jurassic. We still have a long ways to go on our fundraising. But what we want to do is we started our fundraising a little over a year ago. We've raised over $300,000 now. We're well on our goal to get the main fossils that we want to populate the museum, but we wanted to give something back to the community quickly. And so we've purchased a number of dinosaurs, and we're going to put them in this museum, or this building. And
the old schoolhouse.
Yes, the old schoolhouse. It's a nonprofit. They have restored the inside. They have a central room where we're going to have Big Al. We'll have the nest. We will have a juvenile sauropod that was only a few months old when it died.
So I would encourage you to help us out with some funding. That would be awesome. If any of you feel that need, I'd love it. I certainly support it. And I'll put a link in the description where you can link in and have a way to contribute. And I think that'd be awesome.
Myron, I thank you for your support and thank you for your interest.
Thank you for your help today.
You bet.
Great.
My pleasure. Let's do it again sometime.
Okay.
I'm excited to bring some dinosaurs back to the Bighorn Basin where they belong, and I'm hoping you can help. Let's work together. I'll match your contributions up to $10,000, and remember, you can deduct it on your taxes. I've put some instructions and a link on how to do this in the description to this video, and also a pinned comment I made. Thank you.